He's always just trying to prolong his playtime and avoid bath time, avoid bedtime. And all these activities do drain me. They do make me feel tired. And so when I'm on the way home from a long day of work and I'm just visualizing me having to go and start another work, I can't help but feel like, oh gosh, like I wish I didn't have to go home to that, or I wish I didn't have to go home. Now I can just chill and have dinner somewhere else. And then I feel guilty at having those thoughts. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Experimental Parent with me, Jasmine Jialing. This week we're going to talk about mom guilt. So mom guilt, at least for me, is very real. I started off thinking that if I wanted to be a good mother, I have to do everything myself. So from the start, I had always had this expectation of myself that I need to do everything to do with mommying, of being there for my kids, and everyone else can just help me with everything else. Then when I became a parent, I started to realize that my bandwidth, my threshold just wasn't enough to do everything myself. I just couldn't. I know there are mummies out there who are super mummies. You really take on the world and you have no troubles doing that. And I always look to these figures with so much awe, so much inspiration. I really wish I could do all of that all the time. Sometimes I feel really motivated and I can get more done for my children without compromising all my other priorities. But most other times, something else has to give. So when we talk about mom guilt, I think there are quite a few different categorizations of what type of mom guilt we tend to feel. For me, there's the guilt of leaving my children and having to outsource their caregiving to other people other than myself. And most of the time that's because we have to go to work. So that's guilt of having to work and not being there for my children and not spending enough time with them. And then there's also the guilt of when I am with them or I'm going home to them, but feeling like not wanting to be with them all the time. So it's funny, right? It's a mix of so much contradiction almost, that on the one hand I'm guilty because I don't spend enough time with them and I want to spend more time with them. But on the other, there's the guilt of feeling like I don't always want to spend time with them. So I learned over time how to make sense of all these mixed guilt that I have and address them bit by bit, one by one, with what I call cognitive restructuring. So let's first of all address the first type of guilt I have of not having all the answers, of not knowing how to be a good mother. I first felt this way when I just didn't know what kind of carriers I was supposed to buy, what kind of bed. And all these first-time mummies around me just seem to know all the answers. They just know all the go-to places. They just know where to get these things, which are the best, which has the best reviews, what is the functionalities of this one, and what's the value-added purpose of the other one. And I just had no clue. I was just thinking to myself, why do all these people know all these things? And I don't. I somehow feel a bit left out of the conversation. Over time, I told myself that first of all, I can't know everything. Second of all, I realized also over time that I started to know more things. I started to have more knowledge as time went by. And that came with the OJT, the on-job training that I was talking about in my first episode. It's going through it and realizing that knowledge is amassed through time. Some people do a lot more research about it beforehand and they have those answers, but some people just learn on the job. And either ways, it's okay because it boils down to the fact that you want to find those answers for your children. It boils down to the fact that you are doing right by them because you're doing what you know or what you feel is the best to your abilities. And that's all that matters. The second type of guilt is the fact that I have to go to work. So I think it's something that all working mothers can relate, that we are at work most of the time on weekdays. And depending on what kind of jobs we hold, our work demands us to either be there very early in office or to come home later. In my current circumstances with both my children, 1 and 3, The older one is my older son is now in preschool, so he goes to school in the morning at about 8 o'clock, and he comes back from school at about 6 o'clock. Both times in my current work schedule, I do not get to pick him from school and no, I do not get to send him to school and pick him from school on my own. So I have to get the help of my helper to do the sending and the picking up. I envision this is going to be the case also when my second boy goes to school at about 2 years old. So this is something that I've had to come to terms with, and it was a little bit challenging when I first sent my son to school, and I tried so hard to get my work schedule to fit in so that I can at least be able to send him to school and pick him from school, because to me that was so important of being there for him when he needs to be away from home, and happily picking him up when he gets to come back home. Unfortunately, my work schedule doesn't allow me to do so, and something's gotta give. So he's either going to go to school really early and I have to wake him up ahead of the time that he usually would, or he will have to go in very late where breakfast time is over. And for pickup, it can only work if he's probably going to be one of the last few children to be picked up, or just right before the school closes. So I realized that it's all in his best interest, my child's interest, that my helper sends him and picks him from school instead of me doing that if he gets to go to school at better timings, rather than have to wait for me, and then my schedule is always off, and I'm either going to be really late for work or he's going to be late at pickup. I think these days we're very fortunate post-COVID that we get to work from home on some days, and depending on the type of work that you do and the policies in your company, you may be able to also enjoy the flexibility of work from home on some days. But I have to admit that on days that I do work from home, my productivity level isn't as high, because I would want to be there for my child, and I would try to spend more time with him since I'm home and he's hanging around the computer. And I'm speaking about this now about my second child. So my second son is still a baby. He's only just turned 1, so he is still at home playing. And while I'm working, of course, I want to be there for his milestones, talk to him, play with him for a bit before I get to work. So some days my productivity suffers. Some days when I'm feeling extremely productive at home, that bonding time suffers. So I'm just going to have to really shut him out of my zone. I'm like, sorry, mommy needs to work and I need to work on it, and I'm doing all these things. Then my helper will just have to help me take care of him more, and I'll just have to take it as I don't get to spend time with him until I'm done with work. So either ways, working from home does provide some relief to that mom guilt, but it's all about the opportunity cost. It's all about the trade-off. And I've again come to terms with the fact that we can't multitask. That's just not how our brain is programmed. So depending on what the priority is of that day, I will just have to sacrifice something else and make up for it another time. That's the only way I can be efficient and productive in both ways. I recall in the past when it was just my older son and my work schedule back then allowed me to come home earlier, I always made it a point to bathe him and do bedtime routine and to eat with him. So I feel that was the middle ground that I was able to accept. That while I couldn't be the one to send him to school and I can't be there throughout the day with him, I make it a point to be back in time to bathe him. And of course, that physical contact, the conversations, that whole spending time in the shower helps me to bond with him. It helps me to stay in touch with the very hands-on parenting which I really wanted to do for my children. And I got to spend time with him, and make sure that I was the one to put him to sleep, tell him that I loved him. Both me and my husband, actually, both of us were involved in this process: showering, bedtime routine, putting to sleep. Unfortunately, now with my work and with a second child in the picture, it's not always possible to do so. So there are some days where I do get to come home earlier and I will be showering him. I will tell my helper that it's okay that today I will shower him, but some days I can't. And I just have to be okay with that, and tell myself that not being able to shower him for today or tomorrow is not going to ruin the entire mother-son bond. It's not going to destroy the whole family, but I have to make a conscious effort to not get lazy about it. I feel like it's getting very convenient to outsource these things, so I just choose to let go of everything and let everything be the convenient way, but I'm losing that touch, that contact time, that quality time with my children. So it's a conscious effort to say, hey, okay, I think I'm getting lazy, it's kind of down a slippery slope, time for me to get involved again. And then there's the last guilt, which somehow contradicts the second one, when I feel like guilty at having thoughts about not looking forward to spending time with my children. Such times are when I'm on the way home from a long day of work, I'm extremely tired, and I tell myself, oh gosh, okay, especially times where my older child can be quite he can be quite difficult because we're home and we are his safe zone. He will either be very whiny, or he'll be requesting for a lot of things that cannot be done at that time, or he will be dilly-dallying. It's one of those yellow light behaviors that we don't like. He's always just trying to prolong his playtime and avoid bath time, avoid bedtime. And all these activities do drain me. They do make me feel tired. And so when I'm on the way home from a long day of work and I'm just visualizing me having to go and start another work, I can't help but feel like, oh gosh, like I wish I didn't have to go home to that, or I wish I didn't have to go home. Now I can just chill and have dinner somewhere else with my husband or with my friends. Those thoughts do cross my mind, and then I feel guilty at having those thoughts at all. And there's a part of me that is so afraid to verbalize, because it seems like it's going to become real when I say it, and it's such a taboo to admit that sometimes after a long day, the part that I look forward to most after the end of a long day is not to come home to see my kids, but the time that I get to have alone after my kids go to sleep. Sometimes it almost feels as if having mom guilt is a way of making yourself less guilty about feeling those thoughts at all. Almost like the fact that you actually feel guilty about it makes you less of a horrible mom that you think you are. But that's not healthy. Pretending that you feel something that you don't, or pretending that you don't feel something that you do, and tucking it under the rug is not going to help you address the issues at its root. You need facts, you need evidence, and sometimes our brains they are very good at distorting things. Actually, we think that our brains are more accurate than ever, but no, actually our brains are somewhat designed to distort some thoughts, and our brains also follow patterns. So when we have already formed a pattern of negative talk, negative self-talk, we're just going to keep following that pattern. So the point is to use facts, to use evidence to support why you are not as bad a mom as you make yourself out to be. And instead of always depending on other people to validate you, to tell you, oh no, you're a great mom and all that, we need to learn to structure our thoughts in a way that is productive, in a way that validates the work that we have done, the things that we do, the times that we are there for our children, rather than just continue to demoralize ourselves and to put ourselves down about what we are not doing. I'm not sure, for those of you who are listening or watching this out there, if these are the kind of guilts that you feel also as a mom, helping yourself to make peace with that using cognitive restructuring might help you. So first of all, cognitive restructuring is a method where we try to reframe our minds from the typical way we tend to think about things. So it's a pattern that we already form, and those patterns tend to be more pessimistic. They tend to have more self-doubt, and they tend to be more of a fixed mindset kind of self-talk. Then what we want to do is we got to list down what are the feelings that we are feeling, what we are thinking when we are entertaining these thoughts. So the thinking, the feeling, and also what kind of evidence are we providing ourselves that supports the kind of thoughts that we have. So for example, I feel guilty of not having the answers to all the questions that I thought I should have as a mother. So those thoughts that come to my mind are that I am not knowledgeable enough, that I don't put in enough effort, I'm not a conscientious enough mother. And how that makes me feel is I feel guilty, I feel worthless, I feel depressed. So now you have the thoughts and the feelings pertaining to that statement that you have in your mind, right? The evidence now supporting those thoughts and feelings that I have about myself not being a good mother are, say the other day my friend asked me, what are some exercises you do to help your child boost his brain development? And I had no clue. I didn't have the answer to it because I don't do these kind of exercises to boost my child's brain activity or brain development. And so that is evidence that validates the thought and feeling about me not being enough, me not being a conscientious enough mother, me not having the answers that I should have. Now, up to this point, this is all your negative self-talk, right? So this is all me thinking about all the times that I have not been adequate and proving my guilt of not being a good mother right. Okay, now this is the part that's going to take more energy. It's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel very off because our brain has formed patterns to be more efficient for us, right? So everything about my negative self-talk is actually my brain already forming a pattern about how I feel about certain things and how I will just relegate myself to this category because I was not able to fulfill certain tasks. Now, in order to start a new pattern, you have to break your old pattern. So you have to break the cascade. That's what neuroscientists would call it. You have to create a new thought and then find counter evidence that counters that previous negative thought and supports your new thought to convince your brain and convince yourself that, hey, yeah, actually what I thought about myself is not true. There is something else out there, new evidence out there that helps me see things in a different light. Now, when you do that, you are actually forming a new pattern. You are telling your brain that, hey, this is now the path to follow, not that negative path, that more positive path, the evidence that supports how you can actually do things, that growth mindset mentality is that new pattern. And you are becoming more and more familiar with this form of self-talk until it becomes natural for you to be more positive, to always find evidences to support your growth, opportunities and lessons that you can learn, rather than, oh gosh, I'm just like that, this is me, I'm horrible, and it goes down a downward spiral from there. So in my case of me having to go to work and not spending enough time with my children, same thing. I would think that, I'm a lousy mother. What kind of mother doesn't spend a whole day with their children? I feel dejected. I feel guilty. Evidence supporting that is that, when my children come back from school, they don't look for me. I don't know what to talk to them about. And I feel so off touch. I didn't even know about the new mosquito bite that he got. Okay, now counter evidence. I can't always be there for my children. School is good for them. In school, they learn new skills, they make new friends, they expand their social circle, and they're not just confined to whatever the activities we have at home. So school is good for them. It's a good thing to send them to school. And I have to go to work, but on the days where I am not at work, on the weekends, I am always with them. I will spend as much time as I can with them, doing productive, doing constructive things, getting to know them, being in tune with their feelings. So I am not actually being a negligent mommy, because while I have to work to earn money to provide for them, I am also making time to spend with them. And overall, our parent-child relationship is still strong because of the times that I do make an effort to spend with them. As a result, now I feel that I am adequate. I am actually productive. I'm able to balance my role as a staff of the company, of working, being able to financially provide for my child, and I'm also balancing that part of me that is a mother to my child, spending time with them. So I feel uplifted, I feel encouraged, I don't feel so guilty anymore. Now, the third example of that guilt about feeling guilty of feeling like sometimes I don't want to be at home with my kids. So again, negative self-talk. What kind of mother does that? Every mother wants to spend time with their child. The fact that I have entertained the thought of not wanting to be home for my children is a cardinal sin. That is unacceptable. I feel guilty, I feel upset, I feel depressed, I feel demoralized that I would even think like that. Now, to counteract that, I am not a super mommy. I am not going to deny my feelings. I'm not going to lie about myself. I'm going to be true to how I feel. And it is totally acceptable to sometimes feel tired, from having so many roles. It's the same thing when sometimes you just come home and you just don't feel like talking to anybody, including your husband, including your parents. There's nothing guilty. There's nothing to be guilty about to feel certain ways, to feel tired, right? The emotions are neutral. There are no good or bad emotions. So there's nothing to be guilty about feeling sometimes I don't want to talk to anybody, including my children. I don't want to have to go through the whole dilly-dallying, the whole persuasion, the whole trying to convince him to go brush his teeth because I'm tired from a day of work. Nothing wrong about that. What I do make an effort to do is, even though sometimes it could be easier to just walk away, it could be easier to just say, I'm not coming home tonight, and outsource the caregiving to my husband, outsource the caregiving to my helper all the time. I don't do that. I make the conscious effort to come home, to spend adequate time with them, to do bedtime routine. And in those moments, even though I start off feeling like I'm so tired, I don't want to do this, but when I do start it, and eventually when I'm talking to my children, saying goodnight, praying with them, hugging them, all that warmth comes back to me, and I feel again I've done right by my children. There's nothing wrong with the thought, because the action is I still make conscious effort to be there for them. And sometimes I'm just giving myself a break. I feel uplifted, I feel encouraged, I don't feel so guilty anymore. So this is how cognitive restructuring can help you to deal with some of the mom guilt or all kinds of mom guilt that you might feel at different points in your life. In order to be a happy mom, and I realized this when I was getting burnt out from being there all the time with my babies, that I was unhappy. I was not happy when I was with them. I was always scolding them. I always had something horrible to rant about. And I was feeding a lot of negative energy. I was always angry, which makes it totally natural if my children are always angry too. And so I realized that if I'm not going to be a good mother, if I'm not going to be a happy mom, right? So I'm only a good mom to them if I am happy while doing the mothering. And that means taking adequate breaks, sometimes giving myself a break, exercising self-care, so that that rest gives me enough time to recuperate, energize, and I can go even further and go at it happier for my children and for myself. So what would be a good time frame, a good amount of time to say I need self-care? It really depends on your comfort level. To what extent do you feel is a reasonable amount of time to give yourself a break, but not being too detached from your children? For me, I think about once a week or once bi-weekly to have dinner out with my husband. And if caregiving avenues are available, I mean, like, your parents can come help to look after the children, or you have a helper at home whom you trust, and you can just tell them to watch the kids for a while. Or even sometimes, if you don't mind, you can even bring the kids out on a night out, So these are all ways that you can allow yourself time to unwind, to just enjoy food that you love, enjoy doing things that you love. And in that frequency, you feel energized enough to go at motherhood again in a happier, healthier state.
Thanks for tuning in to The Experimental Parent. Remember, we are all in this together. So if you have a story, topic suggestion, or feedback you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you. You can DM me on the show's Instagram, The Experimental Parent, or leave a comment here. If you enjoyed this podcast, Don't forget to like or subscribe so you never miss out on future episodes. Your support means the world to us. So let us know, how was your experiment today?